What's the difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market? That's what we're covering on this episode, so stay tuned. Welcome back. My name is Dale Corpus. I'm a realtor in the Tri-Valley area in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area, and I post videos every Friday about all things real estate. So we're going to be talking about the differences between a buyer's market and a seller's market, and how to make sure that you're in the right market, and then how to protect yourself from either overpaying for a house that you're going to buy or from underselling the house that you want to sell. So ultimately, how can you protect yourself and make sure that you get the best deal possible in both of these markets? All right, so let's get started off with number one. What in the world are we talking about with a buyer's market and a seller's market? So if you're looking at buying or selling, you're in the housing market, you've been exposed to how many people are buying, how many people are selling, and whether the market's super crazy or not. And all we're talking about in these markets is we're trying to look at the overall pattern of what's happening and how many people are buying and how many people are selling, because it ultimately ends up affecting decisions that we make. So you all know markets, whether it's a stock market or a bond market, the real estate market, all have cycles. So during a period of time, they end up going up and then they go down and up and down and up and down. And it ultimately ends up correcting itself, but they always hit these cycles. And in real estate, we call these cycles buyer's markets and seller's markets. So the easiest way to figure out the difference between the two, instead of looking at the complex economics that goes into it, is instead of market, just put the word control. So in a buyer's market, the buyers have control of the market. In a seller's market, the sellers have control of the market. So what does that mean? In the buyer's market, the buyers have control. What do they have control over? They have control over a price, over terms of what they're going to buy, over the speed at which they're going to buy. Whereas the seller, in a seller's market, the sellers have control over the price and of the terms and ultimately what's going to happen in the deal. And this all comes back to kind of just basic economics of supply and demand, right? So supply is talking about how many houses are for sale. You might also hear this with the word inventory. It all means how many homes are for sale. So the supply are homes. For sale, the demand is how many people are purchasing. Right, so supply. What homes exist? How many for sale? Demand. How many people are willing to buy these homes? All right, so for instance, let's talk about a market where there's only, for illustration, we'll say there's only 2 homes for sale on this side, but over here we have 10 buyers, right? In that situation, this is a seller's market. These sellers over here can charge almost anything that they want because there's 10 buyers. Out of these 10 people, there's going to be probably a bidding war for who's going to take these 2 houses. If we flip it around, if there's 10 homes for sale and only 2 buyers, what ends up happening is we're in a buyer's market, right? The buyers over here have control because the sellers are wanting to get rid of these properties and they're not going as quickly as they would like to. So the easiest way to think about it is that a buyer's market is best for buyers. Buyers have control, and the seller's market's best for sellers. Sellers have control. So ultimately, the whole goal of this and figuring out why you do need to know about these markets is so that you don't have to be scared going into the market. You can be prepared and you can figure out it is now actually a good time for you to buy or sell, or should you be patient and wait for the right market? Because if you buy in a seller's market or you sell in a buyer's market, you run the risk of losing money, either overpaying for a deal or underselling your home, because the market isn't lined up with the goals that you have at the exact moment. So knowing the market is going to help you make sure that you buy and sell for the best price possible and that you can do it on your own terms. So let's look at the difference, kind of the key points between these two markets. So a buyer's market, In a buyer's market, the buyers have control. So what you often see in a buyer's market is lower prices. If a home is listed at $900,000, a buyer will most likely be able to ask for somewhere lower, maybe $875,000, and negotiate that price down. Or the buyer may be able to ask for lot and seller concessions, or maybe some personal property. They get to have negotiation power because the sellers are very eager to sell in that market. Also in a buyer's market, you're going to find more deals in real estate. Often in real estate investing, you hear that, the wealth is created in real estate at the time of purchase. So in other words, if you're going to make money in real estate, it's often because you bought at a really good deal. So if you're looking for that, a buyer's market is going to be best for you. You can buy some better deals there. Also in a buyer's market, you're going to find homes listed for sale longer. This is what's called average days on market. So how long has that home been listed for sale? We'll see that being longer in a buyer's market just because there aren't as many buyers. There are more sellers than there are buyers in a buyer's market. So we can track that with a seller's market. In a seller's market, the sellers have control. There are less sellers and more buyers. So what that ends up creating is a lot of higher prices. So that same $900,000 house in a seller's market might be listed at $900,000, $925,000, or $950,000, depending on how aggressive that market is getting. So in a seller's market, we can see these prices go up and up and up. And something to watch out for in a seller's market, if you're looking at buying or selling for that matter, is if an appraiser appraises the property, they might decrease the value. And what can end up happening is even if you sell for $1 million, the appraiser might come in and say, we're only willing to land at $950,000 and can shrink down that price, which is good news for the buyer if they had an appraisal contingency in their offer, but bad news for the seller. Also, sellers in a seller's market, they have control, so they have negotiation power. So if you're a seller in a seller's market, if you list at $900,000 and the buyer offers $890,000, it's not going to be difficult for you to find another buyer who's willing to offer your listing price or higher in a seller's market. Just because there are a lot more buyers out there, you don't have to take the first offer that comes in. There will be more. Also in a seller's market, we're seeing shorter days on market. So for example, right now, we're in a very heavy seller's market and we're seeing sometimes where a home is listed for sale and it gets an offer in 2 hours. Sometimes it's not always that quick. Even if it's not 2 hours, it's 2 days or a week, and homes are kind of flying off the shelves really quickly. So in a seller's market, you want to be prepared to move really, really quickly because homes are selling so fast. Whereas a buyer's market, you have a little bit more time and flexibility in the deal. So hopefully this gives you a good example of a buyer's market, seller's market, and the difference between the two. And the whole goal again is to make sure that find where you're at, either you're buying or you're selling, or you might be doing a mixture of both, and then try to figure out where your market is at and what strategy do you need to make sure that you get the best deal possible. It might be that you want to wait a few months until the market switches over to align with the goals that you have. Or maybe you just need to make sure that you're watching out for the differences between the two and just be mindful of where the market's at, what the market is wanting. That way you can structure your deal in the best way possible. All right, well, hopefully this helps. If you found this helpful, do me a favor and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. You may also want to check out my past video on the 5 mistakes to avoid when getting a mortgage. The link to that video is on the top corner of the screen. Again, I'm Dale Corpus from eXp Realty in San Ramon, California. I help buyers and sellers throughout the Bay Area and Tri-Valley, and I'll see you on my next video.